So let's talk about learning these notes and how that's going to happen. All right, so when we first begin playing, what a magical time that was, right? You just grab the guitar and you take your first lesson, or you look up your first video, and you learn that's what's really important to know is the open string names, right? So those are like the first notes we ever learn. And we learned the low E string is here and it's called E, and then we have the A string here, D string, the G string, the B string, and then the little e, which we will notate with a lowercase e. So what we learn these, and a lot of times we learn little phrases like Eddie ate dynamite, goodbye Eddie, or every awesome dog grows big ears, whatever it is that you learned, right? And that got us going, right? And then maybe we start to learn some chords. We don't really know any of the names or the note names on the fretboard quite yet. But, you know, we learn chords like G and C, and we start playing in this area here. We start playing like on the first 3 frets, right? We start playing in that area. And we're doing G and C and D, like I said, open chords like A and E and this stuff. So as we go through and learn those chords, we start learning about bar chords and stuff like this, right? And so we learned that when we do a bar chord like F, right, we learn our first bar chord and it's generally F. Whoops, we'll undo that. Our first bar chord is generally speaking F, not every time, but we'll go through, and because it's such a magical time for us and a magical color is blue, we'll use blue for this first time. So we're learning stuff, and we learn F, the F bar chord, and F is there, right? And we go and we begin to learn that we can scale notes up, right? So we get F, F sharp, and so forth. But what I'm going to do is instead of putting dots, I'm going to put the note name. So we got F here, right? And that's pretty cool for us. I'm going to have to start drawing these a little bit smaller. So we get F, and then we learn, wait a second, we can play G as well here as a bar chord. And so we start learning these bar chords, and we learn the musical alphabet, and we learn that we can do every chord up the neck, right? G sharp and stuff like this. And then we get A, and then we get A sharp or B flat. We'll call it its more common name. We got B flat here. Then we get B, then we got C on the 8th fret, then we have C sharp on the 9th. Then we have D, then we have D sharp or E flat. Guitarists generally tend to think in sharps, don't we? And then we learned, wow, if we can keep continuing with that pattern, it eventually ends up repeating, doesn't it? Right, so we're playing our major and minor bar chords up and down the neck, all the while that we do that, and then we have F sharp here, don't we? All the while we're doing that, we start learning notes here and there in the first position. Remember what I was talking about? We're learning and we're playing chords here mainly. So before and while we were learning our bar chords, we were still enjoying playing in this area here, right? And so we couldn't help but pick up little things like this is G, isn't it, right here? So that's G. And then we learn, okay, well that's C, right? And then we start doing riffs and all this, little riffs, little hammer-ons, little fills for our chord changes and stuff like that. And we learn the notes that work, and we learn them we learn that, like, we start playing them before we learn the note names. But like we'll learn C is here, right? And we learn that this note works, right? But then, oops, it keeps going to eraser. But then we learned that like this is G, right? But then we also had learned that every single other note that we were playing on the low E string works on the high string as well, don't we? So that's pretty cool for us. So we get two birds with a stone here. You know, we get E, boom. So we kind of end up learning those as well, of course, along with the low E string. And then like I was saying before, we are learning like notes in the first position, right? So we learned that C, and then maybe we learned that this is A on the G string. Ooh, that works really well. And then we know our musical alphabet, and we know when we play E minor, that works really well. And we start learning, oh, this is G sharp, isn't it? Because E major and E minor, right? And we know our E minor, and we know we start putting the pieces together here, don't we? We learn that this is B, right? And then we learn, oh, well, I don't really use too much the flats and stuff like that, but I do know just from knowing the musical alphabet that this is B flat, even though I might not be using it too much right now, right? And so then we know for sure that E is here, right? We'll use that one a lot. We get D, that's a fun one, ain't it? And then we get C sharp here, boom. And then look at that, we start seeing groupings of notes together. Like look at here, we've got an A major chord, don't we? Right? There, an A major triad, and so forth. You start like seeing stuff like this on the neck of the guitar, and it's really cool to start unlocking it, right? D string starts to get, it's a little hairy, but we'll learn F is here, and we do that with our cowboy chord songs a lot of times. We learned that's a root for an F chord that maybe we learned. Maybe we learned how to play, you know, this version of F where we are barring these two, and then we're fretting these two, right? So that root is F there, we kind of learn that. And then maybe we learn B7 and we fret here. Boom. That's pretty cool. And that's nice for us, right? We learned kind of to stay away from this note a lot of times because again, that's B flat. We're not really playing, unless maybe we're playing in the key of F, then we know that that's B flat, right? And then from there, we keep it going. We know we really what happens is we figure out we want to be sliding to these other notes, right? Because this works out really well for us. We're like, well, this is D. What's up here? I hear myself going up from here. And then we realize, hey, that's the same as the open E, isn't it? Right? And then we're learning to tune the guitar as well, right? Because every time we pick it up, it's slightly out of tune. And so we learn a tuning trick. This is A, right? And this open string here, let's go back on that guy. And this open string, ooh man, we're gonna undo all that. This open string here, let me make sure I'm good. This open string here, right? This open string right here is what I was trying to say, A, is the same as the 5th fret, right? And then if we go over to the 5th fret here, we get D, don't we? Right? And that D is the same as the next open string right here, right? And so we start to learn this tuning trick of, oh, that's D, that's cool. Okay, well, then that pattern must continue, right? So we get D, that's nice, and then we get G here, right? Oh, and then this actually ends up being C, because we learned the rule of that tuning trick because the interval from G to B is smaller. You notice these? This is a third and the rest of them are all fourths, right? So we learn that C and we learn to do B here. And then we're like, oh, okay. We know this would all the way up to the 5th fret. And then it goes back to normal, doesn't it? 5th fret is E like we just said, right? And then since we know our musical alphabet from doing these, we're like, okay, from doing the low E string, we're like, okay, so the between here is D sharp or E flat. Okay, that's nice. And the between here, F sharp and G, between F and G is F sharp. And then we get between D, and we like that note, C sharp here, the 7th when we're playing in the key of D major. It's pretty nice, right? So yeah, that's kind of our beginning mode, right? And then we step up. We're gonna do, let's do green for this next one. because then we kind of are starting to get past the beginner stage and start to do the intermediate stage of this, right? And then we're like, well, I can do, and some of these you could argue were the intermediate phases, right? But then we start to learn, okay, well, if I can do, we start to learn our fifth string root bar chords as well. And so we want our fifth string root. I already know the musical alphabet. So let me do my A or fifth string root shapes here. And so we go up to the 7th fret, we learn that's E, right? And we really don't go too far past that on the A string, right? Because all of the other notes that we could do, we could just, instead of doing F here, which we do have, right? And we kind of might intuit that or know that, hey, after E is F, I know the musical alphabet already. Then if we like want to do an F chord, we would just do it on the 1st fret here, right? So we don't ever really have a need just yet to go beyond that, you know? So we're not going too far past that even when we do that, right? But anyways, we had E there, and then we have F, right? And we start doing, putting these together on the E string, and we're doing our chords and so forth. But then we maybe start to learn the pentatonic scale, and I'm going to encircle some of these in green, right? And we start to learn our major and our minor scale in the intermediate sort of phases, maybe in the beginners you could argue, but we learn that that's here, that minor scale, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then we have A again, and then we learn that, right? Then also in the beginning phases, we learned the octave trick here, right? Like A, it's up a string, and then skipping a string, and then skipping a fret, right? So we're skipping a string, and then we're skipping a fret there, right? And we're like, oh, I can get an octave like that. So really, we can start to figure out what notes are. But this, I've found for myself, this didn't really help me to remember what those notes were. I could just figure them out. I always relied on that for a really long time, right? And when I started learning scales and scale degrees, I'll never forget, it was a pretty amazing thing. I was like, this is mind-blowing, right? And I learned that, we got G here as part of our minor scale, don't we? And I learned that this version of the pentatonic scale here, where we have A, right? I'll really quickly encircle the pentatonic scale because we learned that here, right? A, C, D, E, G, and then A, right? That is a part of the pentatonic scale. And then we're learning here, we don't know what it is yet, but we're playing it because it's the scale that our guitar teacher told us or we learned on the internet or whatever to do. And then we're here, and then we go here, here, and then here, right? And that's our pentatonic scale. And then we start to learn and realize that within those notes, I'm going to go back on all of that. Within that pentatonic scale, there's a major and minor, right? So if we start to learn our C major scale and scale degrees and so forth and whatnot, and so we're going from E, and really what we do is we learn, of course, because like I said, the pentatonic scale, we learn this note, but we don't know, we learned this note, but we don't know what the name is yet, right? So we're moving on, and we learn our major scale here, at least I did, right? So we got D, then here we've got F, right? And then we get G, and then we get, our A is here, our B is here, and our C is here. So that gives us our major scale, dun, 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 right? So that's really cool. We learn all those notes, right? And then we start to play in different keys, and we start to play the major scale. We learn this major scale shape where we're playing here, A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, and then A, right? Oh, we didn't know that note, but we know it's the 7th degree because we learned our scales, right? So what's a half step behind A? A half step behind A is G sharp, isn't it? Cool, right? And so then we start to learn the G sharp and the C sharp, right? Are there. We have another F sharp here on the 7th fret, right? And then, we still have this one, right? what we didn't learn. But because we know where D is and we know what E is and we know what's in between those, we kind of just end up learning that by accident, don't we? So there's that. So now we're up through almost the 7th fret and we kind of know all these notes, but what's important is building a relationship with the notes, right? So we're building a relationship with the notes as we move on by playing them, using them in improvisations, using them in chords, and using them in songs, and learning a little bit of this to go along with it. By, if you have a teacher, if you're in school for this, like my friend James Lane, or if you are, doing just being on the internet and so forth. We learn a little bit of theory as we go along here, right? It's kind of implicit in the journey. And if you don't want to learn theory, you really don't have to. You're just not, you can learn the scale degrees and you're not going to know the note names of these, right? But maybe you will by accident. It's just all part of the journey, right? So I want to just throw this out real quick, by the way. When I was playing, I learned a lot of like triads, and that really helped me solidify everything, right? So the notes of a G chord are G, B, and D, right? And so I learned here's G, here's D, and here's B. Whoops, I almost circled B flat. There's B right there, right? And so that right there is your D chord shape, isn't it? And so you're learning those triads if you can up the neck of the guitar, and those really help you play very melodically, But one thing that I didn't throw out for this phase might be that you are, when I want the eraser, it doesn't go. Okay, that was annoying. Anyways, when you're learning this in the intermediate phase in the beginning, one of the things that happens is that you learn, hey, once you reach the 12th fret, it's all a repeat. So then we'll put the green in the intermediate here. We learn, the 12th fret. If the 12th fret is the repeating point, then this note is A, right? This is D. This is G. And then this is B, right? And then for all the notes that we learn in the first position, those are really easy to access and understand where they are, basically. And we know these are all repeats of notes that we have on the lower, right? So we could be playing these down lower, but it's just an extra octave, right? And notice how I'm doing all of the natural notes first, right? These are the ones that I learned first, and these just come right to my head because these are the ones that I use the most, right? And now we've got F. And I'm just kind of not going in any specific order, just as they come into my head as I know them, right? And we've got B flat here. I almost said A sharp. That's okay. It's all the same, right? And we get C here. And then we kind of continue this journey of knowing these guys in the C sharp here. I don't know why that was last. Sorry, C sharp, we love you, right? Okay, so then then we move on, right? Let's do for this final stage, let's kind of do red, right? And we kind of know, let's actually do teal for like an in-between, or like this seafoam green, because we have an in-between of notes that we're filling out, right? We knew our musical alphabet, and maybe sometimes we wanted a 5th string root sounding chord, and so we learned the rest of these, right? G sharp here, right? Because we're kind of doing a lot of, oops, I messed that up. We're kind of doing a lot of different chords and stuff like so. Okay, so we have F sharp. I accidentally put G, that's on me. Doing a lot of different chords and so forth, and using kind of these notes as well, right? And we're learning all of our pentatonic modes here, right? In the teal or the seafoam green. And maybe we're learning the major scale modes, maybe we're not, right? Because if we know the major scale, we know the modes without really realizing it, but it's more of a shift in perspective. I reversed that again. So F sharp, G, come on, Kyle. Get your notes correct. G sharp and then A, right? My bad, y'all. Okay, so when we learn these notes, that's kind of nice. And then we're learning like, well, B, what's behind B? Okay, B flat, and then we don't really maybe use that, but with here, right? We don't really think about that too much, but we do think about F sharp here, because it leads into that G very nicely, right? And we have that 7th degree, you know. So this is kind of where we're at. Like, check out this stuff, right? So like the 11, the 10, and the 9 of the B string, and then the G string notes from the 8th fret. Like, does this sound familiar? Like this place just kind of being like a murky place. Like, what are these notes here? I have no clue what those notes are, right? One thing that is really going to be helpful to do, so now we're moving on to a later form of the journey. We'll do this part in red. One thing that is really helpful to do is to just remember, I just did this by rote memorization. I was like, okay, this is a really weird spot right in the middle of the neck, right in the middle of the ocean. I'm just going to memorize that the 9th fret is E, right? And you maybe know that your pentatonic scale, right? So we're playing E major pentatonic here, 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 here. All these notes, right? G sharp, F sharp, C sharp, and E, right? So, and we know though that the root is like right in that spot of the pentatonic scale, right? So we can think about it like that. But yeah, just rote memorizing that is nice because it's really nice to have a solid place where it's like, I know that this is E because I just know it because I memorized it. And that's really one of the only things that I wrote memorized. It's different for everybody, but this is kind of my journey. And I feel like it could be shared with a lot of other people. But we start playing those triads, like I said, though, right? The triads up and down the neck really helped me to learn because that's helped me to know that this is A here, right? And our triad, again, we have a D shape. A chord is A, C sharp, and E, isn't it, right? So look at this. We've got C sharp here, and we've got this triangular D chord shape here, right? So cool, very nice. We'll go back on that just a little bit. And so that's cool. So, and then if we know A here is here, we know behind A is G sharp, right? Cool, right? And I also did some classical guitar. I did a year of classical guitar training. And so that kind of helped me. They will force you to be like, know this note so that when you read it, you can play it. And that's cool, but we'll talk later about how this stuff is memorized, right? So then we know between E and F is F sharp is F, right? So we got F here. And then, ooh, we're on the D string now, right? But then here behind, again, talking about like this 7th degree, we know that our 7th degree is here. We love to use that because it's very beautiful. So D sharp is here, right? Cool. And then we have the D string, right? Where we have A sharp and B flat here, right? Maybe we don't really want to use that guy, but we do, right? Because that's our blue note. When we do blue notes, we don't really ever be like, oh, I'm doing B flat is this blue note. No, you're just stepping outside of the scale for a while. That's how I viewed it, at least. So there's B flat there. We know because B is right in front of it, right? So the notes that we learn, it's really easy to perceive the notes around it, right? So there's that. But continuing on with this, now we're on the D string, right? Now we could just use all these different notes. Like we could use the octave trick here and be like, oh, well, C is here. Boom, right? But what's really going to help you to remember that is you're playing C, but you want a higher C chord. Well, your root's going to be here. So we're going to be doing different higher chord clusters, right? So like maybe we want like a little bit more of a beautiful C major 7, one without a super low root. So we'll do C here, right? So we'll do like this C, we'll do this E, right? And this G, and then we'll do this B, right? So that's C, E, G, B. That's our C major 7 chord. And so you start to do little things like this, right? And then we do the same thing with B, right? Because we have a B chord here,